If everything you were taught about human history were wrong, would you have the courage to face the truth? Objects that look like batteries with 2,000 years, pyramids submerged at 600 meters deep, civilizations that mastered technologies that we still cannot reproduce today. In this video, you will discover 27 archaeological mysteries that modern science cannot explain and that could turn everything upside down. Who we are, where we came from, and what perhaps they forgot to tell you. Prepare to dive into discoveries so absurd that you will doubt they are real. But they are. And they are challenging the greatest experts on the planet. Just don't watch if you are comfortable with official truths, because after this video maybe there will be no going back. 1. The giant spheres of Costa Rica, lost engineering or celestial code. In the middle of the dense tropical forests of the Diquís region, more than 300 stone spheres have been found since the 1930s, produced mostly in granodiorite, an extremely resistant rock. These structures impress with their perfection. Some show variations in sphericity of less than 5 millimeters. Even more curious is the fact that they were transported and positioned with extreme precision, often forming alignments facing the sunset and the equinoxes. The big question is, how did indigenous peoples who did not use writing, did not know the wheel, and did not possess metal tools manage to sculpt and move blocks that reach 15 tons in the middle of the jungle? And why were certain spheres buried with an almost millimetric care? Some researchers believe they were part of an astronomical observation system or a spiritual symbology not yet understood. Others argue that they functioned as territorial markers of a civilization much older than imagined, whose traces ended up erased by time. 2. The Antikythera mechanism, advanced technology. Ahead of its time, rescued from a Roman shipwreck, the Antikythera mechanism is formed by more than 30 bronze gears, assembled with a level of precision that would only be achieved again in Europe, starting from the 14th century. The mechanism indicates that the ancient Greeks mastered sophisticated astronomical calculations, capable of predicting eclipses, lunar cycles, and even the holding of the Olympic Games through mechanical operations. The most disturbing detail is the use of a differential gear, a technological resource that would only be officially rediscovered in clocks in the 16th century. This raises an inquieting question. Where did such advanced knowledge come from? There are scholars who suggest the existence of a secret technological tradition lost after the collapse of great empires. Others raise the hypothesis that this knowledge was inherited from civilizations even older, perhaps from the East or from cultures that disappeared without leaving clear records. 3. The Nazca Lines, messages to the heavens or sacred rituals. Spread over more than 500 square kilometers in the Peruvian desert, the Nazca Lines remain preserved thanks to the scarcity of rain and winds in the region. What surprises most is not just the size of the drawings. Some exceed 300 meters, but the almost perfect geometric precision achieved without any aerial access, compasses, or modern topography instruments. Several geoglyphs depict animals that did not even inhabit that area, such as the monkey and the spider, suggesting cultural influences coming from other regions of the Americas. The most controversial theory states that the lines would form an energy map of the planet, connecting telluric points, or even landing strips for beings coming from the sky, an idea popularized by Erich von Däniken. Recent research with drones and infrared sensors identified traces invisible to the naked eye, indicating that the complete set may be much vaster and more complex than previously thought. 4. The Voynich manuscript, the enigma that not even machines can solve. With about 240 pages written in a language totally unknown, the Voynich manuscript defies any attempt at interpretation. Its botanical illustrations do not correspond to any catalogued plant, while astrological diagrams resemble lunar calendars, however, with inverted structures. The most intriguing thing is that the frequency and distribution of the words follow real linguistic patterns, making it increasingly less likely that it is a simple hoax. Researchers from the University of Alberta turned to artificial intelligence to try to decipher the text. The result was inconclusive, although it suggested possible Hebrew roots combined with an unprecedented syntax. But this raises new questions. Why would someone create such a complex artificial language in the 15th century? And what would be the reason for hiding such strange botanical and medicinal knowledge? Among the theories, there are those who defend that the manuscript is an alchemical encyclopedia written by a renegade author, or even the last surviving record of a civilization that disappeared without leaving clear traces in history. 5. The submerged city of Yonaguni, hidden pyramids under the sea. In 1986, a diving instructor ended up coming across something unexpected in the waters of Japan, a gigantic submerged formation near the island of Yonaguni. The structure presents right angles, perfectly symmetrical steps, wide platforms and columns that strongly resemble a pyramid in levels. Located more than 25 meters deep, it is estimated to be more than 10,000 years old, a period in which that region would be above sea level during the last ice age. Although part of the geological community defends that it is a natural formation, this explanation finds difficulties in the face of marks similar to cuts, well-defined geometric reliefs, and even zoomorphic statues found nearby. There is also what seems to be a kind of road formed by aligned blocks, connecting Yonaguni to other submerged structures, suggesting something much broader than simple rocks shaped by erosion. If the artificial origin is confirmed, Yonaguni would force historians to completely revise the human chronology. This would indicate the existence of an advanced civilization before the Neolithic, in the Far East, prior even to Göbekli Tepe, possibly linked to an ancient lost empire of the Pacific, frequently associated with the legendary continent of Mu-6. The Paracas' elongated skulls, common humans or something different? Found in 1928 by the archaeologist Julio Tello in the region of Paracas in Peru, these skulls call attention for characteristics outside the standard. They possess about 25% more cranial volume and are approximately 60% heavier than a typical human skull. Furthermore, they present only one parietal suture, while modern humans possess 3. A detail difficult to explain only with artificial cranial deformations made by bindings. Between 2010 and 2015, mitochondrial DNA analyses revealed genetic sequences that do not coincide with any known human population, whether Amerindians, Europeans, or Africans. These results intensified the debate and weakened the idea that it was only an aesthetic cultural practice. The hypotheses vary from the existence of an extinct human subspecies or a group genetically isolated for thousands of years to more controversial theories that suggest a non-human origin. These ideas are usually associated with local myths about beings coming from the sky who would have transmitted knowledge to ancient civilizations. 7. Göbekli Tepe, the sanctuary that defies prehistory. Before Göbekli Tepe was excavated, it was believed that temples only emerged after the development of agriculture. However, this archaeological site in present-day Turkey contradicts this logic. With columns in the shape of a T that reach 6 meters in height, weighing up to 20 tons, and richly decorated with reliefs of animals and abstract symbols, the site was built by hunter-gatherers. The great mystery is how a people without sedentarism, without advanced tools, and without a complex division of labor managed to erect such a monumental structure, and even stranger, bury it intentionally after its use. Some researchers see Göbekli Tepe as the missing link between nomadic life and the emergence of the first organized civilizations. Others suggest that the site would have been a ritualistic center influenced by external knowledge or by striking astronomical events such as comet impacts. Certain symbols found there present similarities with patterns that would emerge thousands of years later in cultures such as the Sumerian and the Egyptian. 8. The Phaistos disc, lost writing or enigmatic code. Discovered in the Minoan palace of Phaistos on the island of Crete, the famous clay disc remains one of the greatest enigmas of archaeology. With approximately 15 centimeters in diameter, it brings 242 symbols organized in a spiral, divided into 61 segments. The most curious detail is that the symbols were stamped and not carved, suggesting a rudimentary form of printing, something extremely advanced for its time. The greatest obstacle to its deciphering is the fact that there is no other known object with the same writing system. Without comparative texts, it becomes impossible to apply traditional methods of translation. The interpretations vary widely. Some believe that the disc is a ritual calendar. Others defend that it contains religious chants, magic formulas, or even military instructions. A bolder theory proposes that it is a sacred language, restricted to a priestly elite, used to record forbidden knowledge, or even information of non-terrestrial origin. 9. The Ica stones, a past that contradicts the official history. In the desert of Peru, thousands of polished andesite stones emerged engraved with scenes that completely challenge the conventional historical narrative. Among the images are humans coexisting with dinosaurs, using telescopes, performing organ transplants, and even extremely complex brain surgeries. A large part of these stones is attributed to the controversial collector Dr. Javier Cabrera d'Arquea, which led many researchers to classify them as modern forgeries. However, some were reportedly found by farmers in deep archaeological layers, associated with fossils of extinct animals, a detail that casts doubts on the explanation of total fraud. And if at least one of these stones is genuine, this would mean that a technologically advanced civilization existed long before ours, having been destroyed, forgotten, or perhaps deliberately erased from the history that we know today. 10. The Moais of Easter Island, sentinels of a forgotten knowledge. The gigantic statues of volcanic tuff of Easter Island intrigue scholars for generations. What many people are unaware of is that most Moais are not limited to the visible heads. They possess entire bodies, buried throughout the centuries. Recent excavations revealed engravings on the backs, geometric patterns, and traces of pigmentation, indicating that these figures were once painted, and visually much more complex than they appear today. The greater enigma, however, remains logistical. How did a relatively small society with limited resources manage to transport statues of up to 80 tons over distances that reach 18 kilometers? The most accepted theory suggests that the Moais were walked with the use of ropes, in an oscillating movement. Still, this does not completely explain the extreme precision of the final positioning, nor the possible alignments with astronomical phenomena. Another mystery remains without a clear answer. Why did the Rapa Nui people suddenly interrupt the construction of the Moais? More recent research points to a possible spiritual collapse, internal conflicts, or even the occurrence of a cataclysmic event. Perhaps the builders knew something that for some reason they decided to abandon or erase from their own cultural memory. 11. The Kailasa Temple, a monument carved against all probabilities. Situated in the complex of the Ellora Caves in India, the Kailasa Temple was not erected stone upon stone, but excavated from top to bottom directly into a mountain of solid rock. It is estimated that about 200,000 tons of material were removed, a work that, with traditional iron tools, would take centuries. However, ancient inscriptions state that everything was completed in just 18 years. The level of complexity impresses. Perfectly proportional columns, detailed three-dimensional sculptures, internal corridors, and sanctuaries that would require an extremely precise planning since the first cut in the rock. A minimum error would make the whole work unfeasible. Faced with this, alternative theories emerge. Some suggest that the temple would be a physical replica of a structure existing on another plane, created to anchor spiritual energy on Earth. Others talk about the use of acoustic technology, capable of shaping the stone by vibration, or even the intervention of entities described in the ancient texts as celestial beings. 12. The submerged pyramids of Cuba, traces of an Atlantis in the Caribbean. Images obtained by sonars to the south of Cuba revealed highly symmetrical geometric structures at more than 600 meters of depth, an extreme depth incompatible with simple natural processes such as marine erosion. Among the identified formations are possible step pyramids, rectangular platforms, and walls that remind of organized streets. If these structures are really artificial, they would have been built at least 10,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age when the sea level was significantly lower. This would place their origin much before the officially recognized civilizations. The mystery deepens by the fact that the investigations were abruptly interrupted. Since the first images, no major official expedition has returned to the location. Would ruins of a disappeared civilization have been found? And why did the subject practically disappear from the scientific debate and the international media? 13. Nan Madol. The enigmatic Atlantis of the Pacific erected over more than 100 artificial islets interconnected by canals that remind of an ancestral Venice. Nan Madol is one of the most inexplicable constructions of the ancient world. The greatest enigma involves the transport of the huge basalt blocks, some exceeding 50 tons, used to erect temples, walls, and residences. There are no evidences of roads, adequate vessels, or tools capable of justifying this feat. Even so, the Sodelur civilization managed to build an entire city over the ocean without leaving written records of how it performed such a feat. Local legends state that the stones were moved through magic levitation or ancestral spells. Among the more technical hypotheses, some researchers suggest the use of vibrational resonance, a principle by which sound can induce vibration in solid materials. Others associate Nan Madol to the mythical continent of Mu, considering the city one of the last cultural expressions of this civilization before its supposed sinking. 14. The Sun Gate, the astronomical enigma of Tiwanaku. Sculpted in a single block of andesite with more than 10 tons, the Sun Gate is located at almost 3,800 meters of altitude in the archaeological site of Tiwanaku in Bolivia. In the center of the relief is the figure of the god Viracocha, surrounded by 48 characters who appear to cry or emanate energy, many of them holding staffs, symbols that some scholars associate with constellations. The geometric patterns around the sculpture seem to follow precise calculations linked to the solar cycles, solstices, and to a possible extremely advanced lunisolar calendar. Furthermore, the stone blocks of Tiwanaku present fittings so perfect that not even a thin blade can penetrate between them, something difficult to replicate even with modern technology. The most controversial theory states that Tiwanaku would not have been built by the historically known indigenous peoples of the region, but by a civilization much older, prior to a great cataclysm occurred more than 12,000 years ago. This event, possibly cosmic or geological, would have destroyed almost all traces of this culture, leaving only silent monuments as witnesses of a forgotten past. 15. The Ziggurat of Dur-Untash, a sanctuary to the gods or an enigmatic interrupted project. Built in the heart of the ancient kingdom of Elam, the Ziggurat of Dur-Untash, currently known as Choga Zanbil, impresses not only for its grandiosity, but for the mystery that involves it. It is one of the rare ziggurats erected outside central Mesopotamia, with a highly symmetrical architecture and originally composed of 5 levels. Different from the standard, it was not dedicated to just one divinity, but to several gods, something uncommon for this type of construction. The most intriguing aspect is in the materials used. Some stones came from regions located at up to 700 kilometers of distance, including rocks that do not exist naturally in that area. How was this transport performed without efficient pack animals or appropriate vehicles? And even stranger, why invest so many resources in a monumental work that was abandoned few decades later? There are researchers who defend that the ziggurat was born from a political or religious ambition that ended up not being sustained by the people. Others raise the hypothesis that its real function went beyond religious cult, being able to involve astronomical or energetic purposes, which would have been deliberately hidden after events little understood. 16. Atlit Yam, the submerged city that should not be there about 10 meters below the current sea level, lies Atlit Yam, a Neolithic village surprisingly sophisticated for its antiquity. The site presents organized houses, structured burials, and above all a circle of vertical stones, carefully positioned in relation to the sunset on the summer solstice, indicating an advanced astronomical knowledge. The disappearance of this community remains without definitive explanation. Human remains found at the site suggest the occurrence of an epidemic, while geological evidences point to the possibility of a devastating tsunami. The most inquieting detail is that the inhabitants seem to have abandoned everything in an abrupt way, as if they were fleeing from something sudden and impossible to contain. If Atlit Yam really was built more than 8,000 years ago, it may represent one of the oldest examples of a society with complex scientific knowledges, a culture that simply disappeared without leaving clear cultural descendants. 17. The Longyu Caves, underground works out of place in history. In the decade of 1990s, Chinese farmers made an unexpected discovery: 24 gigantic caves manually excavated in solid sandstone. Each one of them is monumental, some exceeding 30 meters of height, with internal pillars, staircases, and ceilings covered by perfectly uniform wavy patterns repeated in the whole structure as a technical signature. The total volume of rock removed exceeds 1 million cubic meters, something that would require thousands of workers acting for decades. However, there is no historical record, official document, or even mention in oral traditions about the construction of these caves. This absolute silence raises suspicions. Would these structures have been hidden deliberately? Some believe that they served secret rituals or a civilization that entered in sudden collapse. There are still researchers who observe that the marks on the walls remind of mechanized excavation processes, something that, according to official history, did not exist in ancient China. 18. The Map of Piri Reis, Advanced Cartography. Too much for its time. In 1513, the Ottoman Admiral Piri Reis produced a partial map of the world drawn over gazelle skin. At first sight, it is just one more old map. The astonishment arises in the details. The extremely precise representation of the coast of South America and, even more controversial, of Antarctica without ice, as it would have been more than 6,000 years ago. The own Piri Reis stated to have used maps much older as source, some supposedly dated from the time of Alexander the Great. This raises disconcerting questions. Who produced these original maps? How was it possible to obtain a vision so precise and almost aerial of continents that officially still were not known? Modern studies indicate that the projections used would require mastery of spherical trigonometry, a knowledge that only would be formalized centuries later. The map of Piri Reis could be the forgotten heritage of a global maritime civilization prior to the accepted history, or the proof that certain groups kept in secret a cartographic knowledge much older than we imagine. 19. The unfinished obelisk of Aswan, the colossus that never touched the sky. In the quarry of Aswan rests that which would be the largest obelisk ever produced in ancient Egypt. It remains on the ground, unfinished and cracked, but extremely revealing. Case it had been concluded, it would reach about 42 meters of height and would exceed 1,200 tons, a weight superior to any other known monument of the Egyptian civilization. The great mystery is logistical and technological. How did the Egyptians plan to move this giant without cranes, wheels, tracks, or lifting machines? There are no clear traces of ramps nor transport marks around the quarry. Furthermore, the surfaces cut in the rock exhibit lines surprisingly straight and smooth, difficult to explain only with tools of copper and stone. For this reason, some alternative researchers suggest the use of techniques today lost, such as chemical softening of the stone, vibrational methods, or technologies that we no longer understand. The obelisk may represent not only an interrupted work, but the attempt to replicate a knowledge inherited from epochs much older, knowledge this that maybe already was being lost. 20. Sacsayhuaman. When engineering seems to defy the natural laws. In the surroundings of Cusco in Peru rises Sacsayhuaman, a monumental complex that defies conventional explanations. Its walls are formed by cyclopean blocks, some with up to 200 tons, fitted with an absolute precision, despite possessing irregular formats. There is no use of mortar, and even so, devastating earthquakes did not manage to displace these stones. The most disconcerting is that, even with all the modern technology available, still we do not manage to reproduce this type of fitting with the same level of resistance and durability. How did a civilization that did not use wheels, did not master advanced metallurgy, and did not possess formal writing reach such constructive sophistication. Bolder hypotheses talk in knowledge of resonance, anti-gravity, thermal manipulation of the rock, or molding techniques still unknown. There is also who defends that Sacsayhuaman is much older than the Incas, having been inherited from a previous civilization, possibly prior even to a great global cataclysm. 21. The sonorous stones of Ringing Rocks Park, a natural instrument of the earth? In Bucks County in Pennsylvania, there exists a field of stones apparently common that hides an intriguing phenomenon. When struck, these rocks produce metallic sounds similar to bells or gongs. The most strange detail, upon removing a stone from the location, it loses completely the capacity to sound. Laboratory analyses indicate that the mineral composition of these stones is nothing extraordinary. Then why do they resonate? And why does this happen only in that specific point? Some geologists believe that the phenomenon is linked to the collective resonance between the stones, amplified by the soil and by the natural disposition of the field. Others suggest the presence of local electromagnetic anomalies. There are still more speculative theories that propose that the whole location functions as a natural geological instrument, possibly used by ancient peoples in sonorous rituals, communication at a distance, or practices of vibrational alignment with the earth. 22. The Tunnel of Eupalinos. Absolute precision in the darkness. By around 550 BC, on the Greek island of Samos was built one of the most impressive works of ancient engineering, the Tunnel of Eupalinos. With more than 1 kilometer of extension, it was excavated simultaneously from two opposite extremities of the mountain, and the two tunnels met with a surprising precision. Everything this was done without compasses, GPS, optical instruments, or modern equipment of measurement. Even so, the builders managed to maintain the alignment, the inclination, and the height correct along a dark, irregular, and totally underground route. Some scholars believe that Eupalinos mastered an advanced technique of geometric triangulation, possibly associated to mathematical and symbolic knowledges today lost. Others raise the hypothesis that this project has been inspired by knowledges inherited from civilizations much older, perhaps Egyptians, Atlanteans, or from a forgotten culture. The fact is that no similar work would be performed with this method for more than 2 millennia. 23. The Hypogeum of Malta, architecture created for the invisible. The Hypogeum of Halsaflieni in Malta goes much beyond a simple underground necropolis. It is a complex sculpted directly in the living rock, with multiple levels, labyrinthine corridors, secret chambers, altars, and niches carefully planned. The most disturbing aspect is in the acoustics. The so-called oracle room amplifies masculine voices in specific frequencies, creating a profound resonance that seems to be felt in the whole body. How did a prehistoric people manage to master acoustic effects so precise? Would the hypogeum have been projected for sonorous rituals, induction of altered states of consciousness, or experiences of collective trance? Some theories talk in a lost knowledge of sacred psychoacoustics used to influence the human mind. Others suggest that the location functioned as a center of spiritual initiation, carefully calibrated to provoke specific cognitive and emotional responses. The most intriguing is that, until today, nobody managed to reproduce exactly the same acoustic effect in any other structure of the world. 24. The enigmatic tracks of Malta, marks of giants or traces of lost machines. Spread by the whole island of Malta, and even continuing under the waters of the sea. The so-called cart ruts are parallel grooves excavated directly in the limestone rock. They cross the landscape in a chaotic way. They converge, they bifurcate, they change direction abruptly, and in some cases simply end in cliffs or disappear in the ocean. With depths that reach 60 centimeters and spacings extremely regular, these marks give the impression that very heavy vehicles passed repeated times by the same trajectory. The problem is that the ancient Maltese civilization did not possess metallic wheels, nor animals of traction capable of producing this type of continuous wear. Some hypotheses suggest that the grooves were made when the soil still was softer, while others talk in sleds or structures of wood dragged by oxen. However, No theory explains in a satisfactory way the persistent pattern, the precise alignment, and above all, the fact of many of these tracks being today submerged, indicating that they were created before great changes in the sea level. 25. Pavlopetri, the drowned city that does not fit in history. Discovered accidentally in 1967, Pavlopetri on the south coast of Greece revealed itself one of the submerged cities oldest already identified, with more than 5,000 years. Under the waters, archaeologists found streets well-defined, squares, tombs, courtyards, systems of drainage, and even distinct areas for habitation and productive activities. The great question is, how did a city so well-planned end up in the bottom of the sea? Successive earthquakes? A gradual sinking of the soil? Or a sudden elevation of the level of the waters caused by some extreme event? The most disconcerting aspect is that the urbanism of Pavlopetri presents a level of organization that only would be expected in classical Greece, thousands of years later. This raises the possibility of the city having belonged to an advanced civilization, today forgotten by the official history, perhaps linked to an ancient pre-Minoan empire or even to the legends of Atlantis. 26. The stone spheres of Bosnia. Precision beyond the prehistory. In remote regions and dense forests of Bosnia, explorers found spheres of stone almost perfect, some with more than 3 meters in diameter and weight superior to 30 tons. The symmetry of these structures is so precise that it defies even modern techniques of sculpture in large scale. Analyses indicate an unusual mineral composition, with elements mixed in a way that suggests some kind of process of molding, although one does not know how this would have been done. The most strange is that these spheres arise isolated. There are no ruins nearby, old roads, tools, or clear signs of human occupation around them. The similarity with the famous spheres of Costa Rica raises an intriguing hypothesis. Civilizations separated by oceans could have mastered a same unknown technique. Some theorists suggest astronomical alignments or energetic functions, proposing that these spheres would act as amplifiers of vibration or frequency. 27. The fairy circles of Namibia. Message of nature or something beyond. In the arid desert of Namibia, thousands of circles almost perfect arise in the soil, forming clearings without vegetation, surrounded by rings of grass. They appear in organized patterns, covering gigantic areas for hundreds of kilometers, as if they followed an invisible logic. Diverse explanations try to give account of the phenomenon. Some scientists attribute the circles to the action of underground termites. Others defend that it is a process of self-organization of the plants, competing for water in extreme environments. Even so, no model explains completely the geometric precision, the regularity of the patterns, or the fact of similar phenomena arising also in distant locations, such as in Australia. There are interpretations more symbolic that suggest that the circles would be natural markers of energy of the Earth, or a kind of ecological language still undeciphered. For the local peoples, the explanation is clear. The circles are sacred, created by spirits or superior forces that continue inhabiting the desert. 27 mysteries, 27 questions without definitive answers. Each one of these enigmas shows that despite all the scientific advance, the human history and the own Earth still keep secrets capable of challenging our certitude's most basic. Now we want to know from you, which of these mysteries most called your attention? Which of them do you believe to be closer to being finally explained? Or will it be that the answer already exists, and simply they did not want that it came to public? Leave your comment here below, and if you like this video, YouTube already is recommending 2 other mysteries that promise to expand even more your perception about the past. Click, watch, and continue this investigation with us. Until the next discovery.